So usually on Chav Cheshvan, it's a very special time for us here in Rostov. We have normally a lot of Anash comes here. They come here to be mechazek, the local kehillah, which for us is a very, very, very big chizuk. When we have someone coming, and people sometimes say, why come back to Russia? We have oil, we have 770. But I believe when people come here for a visit, we're not coming specifically for one oil or over another oil. The Rabbeim are everywhere. But we come here personally to somehow inspire also the local Yidden. So, I can't begin today without saying the story. It's not a story. Everyone knows the Maisa from the Rebbe Rashab when he was 5 years old. But I'll say why I want to just repeat this. The story when he came to Zayder, right? The Tzemach Tzedek or Shabbos. It was Vayera. And he asked, why was Avram Zeiche that he was, Hashem was Nisgal at Avram Avinu? And what did the Tzemach Tzedek say? When a Yid at 99 years old decides to do a bris, he's deserving of this. So this is a story we all heard many times. The Rebbe repeated many times. But what I wanted to discuss tonight, what I wanted to say tonight, was that really the Rebbe Rashab and the Rabbein, the Frierdiker Rebbe and our Rebbe, the Mesiras Nefesh they had for Klal Yisrael, for Yiddishkeit in the hardest of times, was no less than that Avram Avinu had. And it's something that we see to this very day with the holy Yidden that live here in Russia. So the Rebbe Rashab took achrayus for all of the Yidden. There was, there are many Rabbeim, many different Chassidim and different factions that usually focused on their own Chassidus, right? You had a Rebbe that was focused on his Chassidim, and that was it. The Rebbe Rashab went out to worry about every single Yid living in Russia and elsewhere. So it was the hardest of times. The Russian Revolution took place. The Rebbe came to Rostov, and the first few years were very turbulent, very difficult until he decided, you saw in the video, the house that the Rebbe Rashab bought. The Rebbe Rashab was there for a year and a half. It was a very difficult time. But nonetheless, the Rebbe Rashab worried for all of the Yidden. Anyone that knows a little geography, there's a Kavkazi Yidden that live around Rostov. So Kavkazi Yidden come from southern Russia. So they had tremendous hardships and difficulties. They didn't have any Rabbanim. So even the Nazis, when they came here and they occupied southern Russia, and they killed every single Jew. So in Rostov, they killed 20,000 Jews. It was the largest mass killing of Yidden. When they saw Kavkazi Jews, they thought they weren't Jews, but they didn't kill them. The Rebbe Rashab sent his shluchim to the Kavkazi Yidden so that he should protect and save these kehillas. So there's a tremendous Mesiras Nefesh the Rebbe Rashab had, and it was passed on in the famous story of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which happened here when he gathered the Chassidim and he made a minyan that they're going to take achrayus for the Yiddishkeit and for the Yidden all over Russia. But what I wanted to talk about today was the Mesiras Nefesh that the Yidden in Russia have. I've had the schus to be on shlichus here for the past 11 years. And before that, I had the schus of being on shlichus in California, which is a bit of a, if you could say, there's it was a little challenging, the move, let's just put it mildly, to come from California to Rostov. But not a day goes by that I don't sit here and think what a schus it is to be here amongst Yidden that have a Mesiras Nefesh, which I ask myself, where do they get this Mesiras Nefesh? Where do they get the Mesiras Nefesh? We're after 70 years of communism. We're after multiple occupations of the Nazis that killed every single Jew in the city. Where do they get this Mesiras Nefesh to want to embrace Yiddishkeit, to want to come out of the woodwork and to go do brisim at ages that are almost as amazing as the age Avram Avinu did it? To go ahead and begin keeping kashrus and Shabbos in a city that has no kosher restaurants. Where do they get this from? There's only one answer, I think, is that the Rabbeim have left their mark on every single Jew. They left this dormant Mesiras Nefesh that exists in every single Jew in Russia. And this Mesiras Nefesh has been coming through the Rebbe's shluchim that he sent here, through the help the Rebbe sent throughout Soviet times, these hidden underground shluchim that came here. If it was Rabbi Levi, if it was other ones that came, and it kept this spark going. And today it's expanding, it's showing, we're feeling it, we're seeing it. So I want to share with you a few stories. In this video that we just watched, we saw a lady by the name of Miriam Bela. So she was an amazing Jew who had tremendous mysterious nefesh throughout Soviet times to keep Yiddishkeit going. So she was a Jew that in recent years, the past 20, 30 years, obviously, like many other Yidden living here, have challenges, begashmias. They earn a $150 a pension, and it's very hard to live off of that. But she was so proud of her Yiddishkeit, so proud of who she was. She asked me for Sforim. She wanted to learn. I take my kids to her house. She had no children, and her husband passed away, and she lived alone. And we'd come, I'd take my kids, we'd go there, we'd call her Bubby Miriam. And together we'd go there thinking, to get inspired from her. So one day I get a call from Miriam and she tells me, Rabbi, I need to see you urgently. When you get a call from a 90-year-old woman, you take it. And I said, I'm going to come to you, no problem. Do you need me to come to you today? She said, no, I'm going to come to you. So I told her, Miriam, at the time I think she was 88 years old, or you're 88 years old, you don't need to schlep to me. I'll come to your house. She said, no, I must come to you. I'll be by you in a half an hour. She shows up in the shul, our ancient shul. It's called the Cantonist, the Soldatskaya Synagoga. And she comes up to my office and she takes her purse and she tells me, she says that I am now going to do a mitzvah that I've dreamed of doing my entire life. And she tells me the following story. She says that I lived here through the Nazi times, and it was a terribly difficult time. I barely survived the war. And since then until today, I've been dedicating my life to bring Yiddishkeit back, to teach people Yiddish, to teach them about our traditions. I love this shul more than I love my own home. But there's one mitzvah I could never fulfill, and that's the mitzvah of tzedakah. You know, Rabbi, in what house I live in. She lives in a small, tiny one-room apartment, which is also the living room and also the kitchen. It's like a studio, but it's not a studio. It's a 25 square meters. She says, my means, I could never give tzedakah. She said, today I'm here to give you tzedakah. And she opens her purse and she hands me $200. I look at this woman. $200 is about a month and a half of pension for her. I look at Miriam. I tell her, Miriam, what are you doing? How are you giving me this money? She says, today I received restitution money from the German government. I received $2,000. And the first stop, I just picked up this money from the bank. This is the first money I received from the Germans. And I said, the first stop has to be our beloved shul. I want to come here. I want to bring money here. I want this money to go to whatever you think it needs to go to. But for me, this is the happiest day of my life, a day that I could come here and give tzedakah. I look at this woman. She's 90 years old, hitting 90. And what gives her joy? Gives her joy is that there's a shul. She tells me when my grandparents wanted to come to shul, I would walk them to shul and I would wait outside. I was a student in the university. I couldn't come in shul. If I'd come into shul, they'd kick me out of the university. So throughout communist times, I'd stand by the door. I'd wait for my bubby, my zaidi to come out, my parents to come in, then I'd go back home. Then when the shluchim arrived in 1991, I started coming to shul every single day. When I come to shul, I know this is my home. I know my grandparents used to come here. My parents used to come here. And today I feel this tremendous, tremendous feeling of joy that I could come. I could actually give something. I look at Miriam. I think how difficult it is for us sometimes to go into our own wallets. And I look at her and I'm amazed. What an amazing person. One of the biggest challenges we have in Russia is assimilation. When I first moved here, I gathered a whole group of students. And I farbrained, I said, it's so important we have to marry Jewish because there's 96% assimilation rate. What that means is if I have a Jewish day school, in my Jewish day school, we have close to 100 kids, 95 kids. Out of those kids, only 5 or 6 of them have Jewish fathers. So think about the type of assimilation rate. What communism has done, it's no Jewish families. So I said we have to work on the youth. We have to encourage them to marry and establish Jewish homes. And they really want to. We sat with our brain. You have to have a Jewish wife, a Jewish husband. You have to have a chuppah to establish a home. Al Yesodei Torah Mitzvos. So we have a project in Russia, which is where we teach the kids, the students, Torah lessons every week. And then we go on a trip with them, a Jewish heritage trip to Europe. And what happens is every single year when we make this trip, one of the places we stop at is in Auschwitz or in Buchenwald. And the reason we do that is that the kids should be misoyer, the students should be misoyer a little bit to come back, to do what they can to reconnect to Yiddishkeit. They should be, a little bit emotional, and hopefully this will help get them back on the path. So I recall we're in Buchenwald, and I was standing with about 45 students from Rostov in the gas chambers. And I stood there. I said, before, you know, we had a moment of silence. And I said, a moment of silence is very nice, but our tradition is not so much into silence. Our tradition is into doing. Our tradition is to not be silent, but to go ahead and do something. As I said, we're standing here in a room where hundreds of thousands of our brothers and sisters gave up their lives al Kiddush Hashem. And incidentally, we come from Rostov, the city which was most affected by the Holocaust in Russia, the city which had the largest mass killing of Yidden. And I said, when we go back to Rostov in a few days, if we go back the same people that we were when we left, then this trip wasn't worth anything. We have to do something serious to change Rostov, to make a Jewish religious revolution. So I spoke, Dvorim Hayetzim min halev, and that's an amazing thing in Russia, that in Russia you don't need to be politically correct. You say it the way it is. And people are kalim to take it. You know, in the States, we have to beat around the bush, and you have to this. Probably in England also, you have to be very proper. In England, you have to be even more proper. Here in Russia, you say it to give a clap on the back, and you say it, if it doesn't work, you give the clap a little harder, and you give it harder, and eventually, you know. So we arrived back to the hotel. Now, what happens when we're with students in Russia, you know, there's a concept of lights out in camps and yeshivas. With students in Russia, the lights go out when the sun rises. So we're standing in the lobby, and they said, let's make a farbrengen. You know, farbrengens go very well here. Anything that has anything involved with a little Chaim goes very well. So we're sitting in the lobby of the Sheraton Hotel in a city near Buchenwald. And we're making the farbrengen for a few hours. It's 2:30 in the morning, and I'm feeling a little drowsy. And I tell the chevra, you know, I thought either I'm going to fall asleep soon, they'll fall asleep soon. I said, Tachlis, we have to have some type of this farbrengen has to have some type of an ending, some type of a uvechein. So I said, chevra, listen, we're having a beautiful farbrengen. We had a special trip, but bottom line is, if we go back to Rostov without making a achlata, this is useless. I want to ask you guys, what are you willing to take upon yourselves? And one girl gets up and she says, I'm going to start lighting Shabbos candles. Okay, very nice. Another boy gets up and he says, you know, I've considered putting on tefillin. I don't have them, but I've made the decision today that I'll buy tefillin and I'll put on tefillin every day. Very nice, beautiful. Another guy gets up and he says, you know, I'm going to keep one Shabbos every month. I'm going to keep a full Shabbos. Me'es leis, I'm going to keep Shabbos, what it means, once a month. And a beautiful, beautiful achlata. It's very nice. But then we have this one cool boy, a 19-year-old boy at the time. His name is Vova. Vova gets up and he says, Chevre, he says, guys, what is this? Dietsky Sad. What is this? This is a preschool here. We come here to Buchenwald. We come here on this Jewish heritage trip. And you're going to light a candle once a week that takes you 5 seconds? Wow, that's what you're going to do? That's what we're taking from here? Igor, very nice. You want to put on tefillin. Well, you're going to go? You're going to wrap tefillin 5 minutes a day? That's it you're going to do? And he goes around the room remembering, he's a smart boy, what everyone said. He said, Chevron, we're coming from Rostov. Rostov is a city that was the capital of Chabad. 100 years ago, the capital of Chabad was our city. And we don't live there because we have some schus, because we live there by chance. And it's a tremendous achrayas responsibility, atveственность in Russian, that we come from Rostov, from a city where the Rebbe Rashab lived. So this is what I'm telling you now. I take upon myself when we go back to Rostov that I will dedicate next year of my life to go to Yeshiva Tomchei Tmimim. The Rebbe Rashab established Tomchei Tmimim, the Chabad Yeshiva. There is one in Moscow. I will dedicate a full year and go to Yeshiva and consider becoming a proper Jew. I look at this guy, Vova. This is a young guy, 19-year-old guy, very popular. He was in some business, perhaps even shady business, but we don't ask questions here. And he's going to go to Yeshiva. I didn't believe, you know, I knew to myself that lavdav, you know, we all made achlotas by Farbrengen. Let's be honest. I don't know about you, but I make the same achlata. Usually it takes 5-6 times till it actually happens. We make the achlata, a few days you do it, you forget it, and the next Farbrengen you do it again. The next Farbrengen, eventually, hopefully after 5-6 times you do the achlata. So I told myself, Vova, made achlata. Whether or not it's going to happen, the thought counts. It's a thought that counts. Very nice. We come back to Rostov. A week later, I get a text, or 2-3 days later, I get a text message, a WhatsApp message It says, Rabbi, do you remember what you promised you would give me if I go to yeshiva? Now, WhatsApp has a tremendously useful feature where if you don't read the message, it doesn't have 2 check marks. So I didn't want to read it. I have a very weak spot in my heart for people that try using us for presents. Because when I was a bacher, I actually, my first fundraising for an overnight camp in Russia was in London. I remember going to Hampstead Garden suburb, going from house to house to fundraise for Ukraine for a camp we were doing. Believe me, I was 17 years old at the time, knocking on doors, said no solicitations. I said, I don't even know what we learned in Yeshiva. What solicitation mean? I have no idea what that is. We're knocking on the doors. Yes, we're going to Russia, Ukraine, orphan kids, come help us. So when I went to camp, the way it worked, the first year I went to camp, we realized that these kids are willing to do brisim. So the first year I went there, we'd give them a Tetris game. You remember before the games that we have today, a Tetris, cost $2. It just played Tetris. So the first year in 1997 when I went, or 1998 or 97 when I went to camp, to get a kid to do a bris, you had to give him a Tetris game. When they saw that the American Bachram coming were willing to part with various prizes to get a bris, so there was a huge inflation rate. The next year they wanted a Game Gear, Game Boy. A year later, they wanted PlayStations. The next year, they wanted cell phones. Before I had a cell phone, they knew there was such a thing as cell phone. They didn't even have home phones at the time, but they wanted a cell phone. And it was getting out of hand. The last year I was there, someone wanted us to connect the home phone to his house if he does a bris. It was getting out of hand. So when I hear someone is going to do a mitzvah because you promised him. Now, I was at a Farbrengen in the Sheraton Hotel after we went to Buchenwald. It was my moment of weakness. I don't know what happened there. I don't remember. It was, you sit with the Russian people, they make you make a l'chaim. If I made one l'chaim too many, perhaps I made a promise that I can't hold. Maybe I promised him a phone. Maybe I promised him a computer. In a moment of weakness, I may have even promised a car. So here I am thinking to myself, what did I promise this guy that for that he's willing to go to yeshiva? So I was like, you're going because of my gift. I don't want to hear. I don't want to talk. I'm not opening this message. So I don't open the WhatsApp message and there's no 2 check marks, Baruch Hashem for that. And I'm going on with my life. A few days later, I see another one of our youngsters who's on the trip. So I asked this youngster, tell me, when we were on the trip, do you remember, did I promise anything to this guy? He said, yes, you did. I said, is it expensive? He says, yeah, it's not cheap. I'm like, okay, tell me, please, what did I promise him? So he says, you promised him that if he goes to yeshiva, you're going to get him a black hat. I said, black hat, a fedora? He said, yeah. You said that if he goes to yeshiva, you'll buy him a black hat. That's it? He said, yeah. So I open my text message. I write this, Vova, 2 black hats from me. No problem. Tell me what size you are. You'll get them tomorrow. That's it. He wants to feel like a mensch. He wants to go to yeshiva and have a black hat. I sent him a black hat. He went to yeshiva. Chof Cheshvan that year, I called the yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva, I said, I want the Bachram to come to Rostov. Because I figured the Kehillah would get tremendous chayas from seeing this boy that went to yeshiva. He came back to Rostov. They came to Rostov. And I said, I'm going to give the first aliyah to this Vova. He did a bris. His name is David. So I go to call him to the Torah. I say, Yamoid, Dabachar David ben Avram. His father's not Jewish. He screams for the corner of the room, Hatomim David ben Avram. He's been in yeshiva 3 months. He's correcting me, the rabbi, that I called him David when he's really Hatomim David. So I say, Yamoid, Hatomim David ben Avram. He comes up. He gets his aliyah. He's so happy. He's looking, he's glowing. This is a boy, a Rostover Yid, a Rostover Bacher, a Tom Chetim, a Tomim from Rostov that made this tremendous Mesiras Nefesh to go out all the way. This is something that you don't have anywhere else. Only here that you could take someone, turn him around, and he comes back. Since then, what is he now? He has smicha. When I leave Rostov, I could call him to come here, and he lanes. He did the whole package. He lanes better than me. Don't tell him. It's a problem. I invite him to come back to lane only one Shabbos, because if I worry if I'm gone for too many Shabbos, and they might tell me, Rabbi, stay behind. Go back to Canada where you come from. We'll keep David. But this is a beautiful thing that you see people changing. I want to share, I know we're a little out of time, so I want to share one other story with you, and then just a point that, for me, the most inspiring thing, the thing that moves me most is when a Yid here does a bris. There's nothing in the world that gets close to the feeling when you look at a Jew who was born and raised in Russia. No one had a bris here at 8 days old. Communism meant that the institution of a bris milah, the concept where an 8-day-old boy does a bris milah, doesn't exist. No one has ever heard of it. So you have Mesiras Nefesh like Avram Avinu that these Yidden have at an older age to go and do a bris. So someone in my shul came to me. His name is Boris, a 50-year-old man. He tells me, Rabbi, I want to do a bris. Very, very moved. I look at this Boris. I didn't have to push him. It's not my schus. I didn't do anything here. He comes to me, wants to do a bris. I call up the moyel, Shaya Shafit. He lives in Moscow. Tell him, Reb Shaya, we have an order came in. We need you to come to Rostov. He tells me, okay, I'll be there next week on Tuesday. I tell Boris, next Tuesday we have a bris. Now, where does the bris happen? It happens in my office. It happens on my desk. My desk becomes the operating table. We put a mattress on my desk. Any doctors here? No doctors here? We have to sterilize the room. Any doctors would know when you do an operation, you do some type of a procedure, you have to sterilize the room. So I have a can of Lysol. We sterilize the room with a Lysol strawberry flavor. They say it's better than the lime flavor. And my office is so Boris comes up. He's waiting that day. I get a call from the moyel. I have bad news. What's the bad news? He landed in Rostov, but his suitcase didn't arrive with all the tools. I told him, listen, this Boris wants to do it. If you need a kitchen knife, we have whatever you need. Tell me what you. No, he said, Chaim, no jokes. The next flight is arriving at 2 p.m. in Mirz Hashem. Okay, so 2 p.m. we have 5 o'clock is Shkia. So we have 3 hours. It's an hour drive from the airport to us. He landed at 12. He's going to wait at the airport for 2 hours. At 2:05, he calls me, Rabbi, good news. The suitcase arrived. I'm heading to Shul. He comes to Shul, goes to mikveh, does all the preparations. Next, Boris comes in my office. I'm shedding tears. I'm very emotional. I'm shedding tears before it even begins. Before the show began, he's on the bed. He's on my table. He's with the mattress. This guy, 50-year-old guy, why on earth would he choose to do a bris? I have no idea. I don't support it. I don't think it's normal. But he has in serious nefesh. He has this thing in his heart. Tells him he has to do it. This pintaliyid. So he's lying on my thing, and we begin the bris. In the middle of the bris, there's a knock on the door. I go to the door, I open the door, and there's a 13-year-old boy, Nikita. And he tells me, Rabbi, is the moyel in town? I said, yes. He learns in our school. His father is not Jewish. And we just met him this past summer in camp. He says, I want to do a bris today. I told him, are you sure? He said, yes. I said, does your mother know? He said, when I was back a bacher in Ukraine, we do brisim. Not always do we ask the parents. And I learned the hard way. You always want to make sure the parents know. When they send their kid to camp and he comes back with the bris, it's not always the easiest thing. So I told him, does your mother know? Yes. So I come back into the moyel. I say, Reb Shaya, we have to hurry on Boris because we have to fit in Nikita before Shkia. Now, for some reason, I said it in Russian. Boris heard this. He's like, no, don't rush. There's no rush. Take your time, Reb Shaya. Don't rush on me, please. Okay? 15 minutes before Shkia, Nikita gets on the bed, gets on the table, and we're doing a bris on Nikita. He's terrified. He's shaking. He's mamish, terrified like I've never seen before. He has this huge fear, and we're doing the bris. I said, Nikita, you're sure you want? Yes, I want to do it, because he's having a panic attack. I told him, Nikita, what do you like? You like basketball? Yeah, I told him, let's talk about basketball, the NBA, whatever you want. We did the bris on Nikita. After the bris, we're sewing him up. And I'm asking Nikita, why did you decide to do a bris today? Tell me, why did you do a bris today? You're terrified. What would lead you to doing a bris? He told me, Chaim, this summer, I went to your overnight camp. And for me, overnight camp is our biggest pull. The Rebbe said what a camp does. Why was the Rebbe so big into camps? It's the 24-hour avira. For me, the biggest thing is our overnight camp. So he says, I was in camp in the summer. And on Shabbos, the head counselor said, who wants to get an aliyah? I knew that I turned 13 a few months ago, and I said, I want an aliyah. They promised a bracha for you and for your family. So the head counselor said, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost. You're going to have to pay. So I told the head counselor, I don't have money. He said, no. We don't charge you money. You have to do a mitzvah, a big mitzvah. What mitzvah are you going to do if we give you an aliyah? So Nikita is thinking, and Nikita said, I decided, my counselor told me that the most important mitzvah for us is a bris. I'll do a bris. So I said, I'll do a bris. So the head counselor announced, Nikita was going to do a bris, we'll get an aliyah, but there's one problem. The head counselor says, I live in Moscow and you live in Rostov. Nikita said he's not going to do a bris right away. He said he's going to do a bris within 3 years. So the head counselor said, wait a minute, how do I know you're going to do it? I need a guarantor. I'm going to go back to Moscow. You're not going to do it. And we gave you an aliyah. So Nikita looks up at his counselor, a beautiful boy, an 18-year-old boy from Rostov, Shalom Shapira, a boy that became frum on his own, started keeping Shabbos, kashrus, an amazing yid. He looks up at his counselor and he says, he will be my guarantor. When they say he will be the guarantor, the head counselor says, no questions, we're going ahead with this. And they gave him an aliyah. Nikita looks at me and he says, you know what happened to Shalom? This Shalom is dear counselor, this beautiful Baal Tshuva of ours, someone who gave his life for Yiddishkeit, was killed in a car accident a few months before the Moil came to Rostov. This beautiful boy was like a son to us. He was driving a few hours away from Rostov. He was hit head-on collision and he was killed. And Nikita looks at me and says, how could I wait 3 more years to do a bris? I said, I'm going to do a bris within 3 years. How can I wait 3 years when I know that Shalom is waiting for me? When the bris was over, we made the bracha. We gave the naming ceremony. I took the Kiddush cup. I looked at him and I said, V'yikara Shmoi B'Yisrael. He looks at me. I said, no, what name? He says, what do you think? Shalom, for his counselor. I choked up. How do you look? You look at a boy, a 13-year-old boy. His father's not Jewish. He knew nothing about Yiddishkeit. He's taking a Jewish name on this day in honor of his counselor, Mesiras Nefesh, like I've never seen before. So I say, Shalom, Ben Avram, and I'm about to continue. He's like, wait a minute. Dov there. He's adding the Rebbe Rashab's name. It's going to be Shalom for his counselor and Dov there for the Rebbe Rashab. Not a dry eye in the room. We finish this. We go downstairs. We make a little meal. And now he says, now we have to go to the oil to the Rebbe Rashab. I want to write my first pan with a Hebrew name. I look at this boy. What Mesiras Nefesh. What a tremendous, tremendous boy this is. He knew, how does this happen? How does he have this Mesiras Nefesh? Where does it come from? Who gives him this inspiration to come? It wasn't me. What was it? It is his neshama, the Rabbeim that lived, the Chassidus that began in Russia, has installed inside every single person some special spark. It was dormant for 70 years. It was sitting aside for so long, and suddenly now it's coming out. Suddenly now people are running right and left doing tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. You know, before I moved here, when I told people, and I'm ending now, Rabbi, before I moved here, I told my friends, they asked me, why are you moving? I said, we're moving to Russia to inspire. We're moving to Russia to push, to push. Now I'm living here 11 years. I could say one thing, that more than we inspire, we get inspired. So I think the message is that, we demand of everyone, Mesiras Nefesh, we demand of everyone to change. We as Anash, as Shluchim, as Rabbanim, we're always telling people that they have to become better, they have to do more. But I think we should ask ourselves the same question. We know how hard it is to change ourselves. When we want to do something more, when we want to take something up, it's so difficult. And yet we demand of these people that we deal with on a daily basis, these community members, these Yidden, that they should do changes that are much bigger than anything we've ever done. So I think the message is that if these tremendously inspiring Yidden have what it takes to make changes, how much more so we could change something within us. And one last thought about the Rebbe Rashab. There was a chassid that lived in Rostov in 1918. He went to the Rebbe Rashab and he told the Rebbe Rashab, I want to leave Rostov. The things were getting difficult here. The revolution took place. It became hard to live as a Yid. So he told the Rebbe Rashab, I want to leave the city so I could live as a Yid somewhere else where people won't find us. They were coming. The KGB was coming. The NKVD. So the Rebbe Rashab didn't tell him, don't leave. The Rebbe Rashab didn't tell him, you must stay. The Rebbe Rashab told him, if you leave, who's going to stay behind? That was the message. If you leave, who's going to stay behind? What happened to this chassid? His name was Mordechai Lifshitz. In 1918, when he heard this from the Rebbe Rashab, he decided to stay in Rostov. In 1920, the Rebbe Rashab was nistalik. Mordechai Lifshitz remained in Rostov. In 1923, the Frierdiker Rebbe left to Leningrad, and Lifshitz stayed. Mordechai Lifshitz stayed in Rostov. 1942, the Nazis occupied Rostov. He went into hiding. They killed every single Yid in the city, and he stayed in Rostov. In 1960, he was the last remaining from Yid in Rostov. Long beard. There were years that he had no kosher meat. So what did he do? He didn't eat meat. He ate fish for the whole year. In 1969, he passed away, and he's buried a few plots away from the Rebbe Rashab. What did the Rebbe Rashab tell him? He didn't tell him, don't leave. He told him, if you leave, who's going to stay behind? I think that's a message for all of us, both Shluchim, both Chassidim, Anash, anyone, that we have to stay the course. The Rebbe gave us a mission. The mission is to bring Mashiach. Sometimes we want to take the easy way out. Sometimes we or a shlichus, we're saying it's getting too hard, it's getting too difficult. Let's go somewhere. When it happens to me, and it happens quite often, when you live in Russia, sometimes you wonder, could we handle, there's a problem. I think about Mordechai Lifshitz. And because the Rebbe Rashab told him, if you leave, who's going to stay behind? That was strong enough to keep him going for so long. How much more so that we're shluchim, or that we're anash, and the Rebbe gave us a mission that we have to do something, that we should have the koiches, and we have the koiches to do and to fulfill our mission, that we should be zeichet to the coming of Mashiach, Meir V'Amenu Mamish. Amen. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim.